Vision 2050 is the update to our comprehensive plan. And Orange County, as a chartered county, has some governing documents that are very important in the way that we do things. One of those, of course, is our comprehensive plan. And as anything happens over time, there are pieces and parts of it that are just very outdated and needed to be updated. I will say this to the people who are here who have worked so hard on the update to the comprehensive plan and Vision 2050, there's a lot of good in there. We've looked at a sustainability and resiliency effort that is threaded through each section. My office spent no less than 7 hours in the transportation chapter alone. So there's been a lot of work done. That doesn't mean that we're done working. And so the really important piece that we're back out here for right now is to make sure that the public understands it and that we're hearing from the public, and that you all, if you have questions about the land use in the Vision 2050 plan, that we're answering those questions. So of course, we could have either done like a full question and answer thing, but it would have probably been like a full 72 hours because we understand this is very complex. But luckily, I work with some brilliant people who believe that a good way to make sure this information was getting out was to have stations, and that at each of those stations there was particular layers of information. So I'm going to introduce Alberto Vargas, who's going to come up and give you kind of an umbrella overview. But I want you to frame in your mind what Vision 2050 is as a comprehensive plan. It is the blueprint. So it's not code. Orange Code is different, and that'll be coming. And I'm probably going to come back out and talk to you again when Orange Code comes, because it's really the machinery. And if you can think of, I was trying to come up with some decent analogy, but it's really difficult to come up with an analogy for the layers of governing documents. But if I think about Vision 2050, it's our vision, it's the blueprint, it's sort of the body of the car, the code is the engine. And so understanding that we need to have that good blueprint, we need to have that good body, it needs to be stable, it needs to be functional, and it certainly needs to speak to the needs and interests of all of our residents. So that is why these, the next few engagements are going to be really important for these different departments. One of the things I want to make sure that if you have family, friends, neighbors, interested parties across Orange County that couldn't be here, or that it just didn't work out, or let's say after tonight you're like, I could actually learn more. There's going to be more of these. Each district is going to have one. So, I know this is a heavy lift for the group of people who've been working on this for several years now, but I think it's really critical that our public understands and has their moment to really contribute, because we're creating our future whenever we create this document. It really is the vision for our future. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Alberto Vargas, and he's going to give you some more information about Vision 2050.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Very important for us to continue that conversation to make a draft even better, and to see the group that is present with us tonight. It's even more exciting, because that is your future. The different age groups that are here is really all about what's going on. So let me go ahead and get started here with what we're going to do. After the framework, just a quick introduction of what Vision 2050 is really all about. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit with folks that are throughout the room here, that will be able to engage your comments and receive your concerns, and we're going to collect all of those and bring them back to you before we split tonight. Can you hear me okay? Is this better? Okay. So we will definitely continue the level of engagement throughout the night tonight, and we will end the evening in that manner. We will tell you in terms of what is expected for the next level of engagement at the public hearing level. There are many things that are unpredictable in our county, in the way our lives go, but there's certain things that are certain. And one of them is that Orange County continues to grow, and we can't stop that. So we might as well start planning for how that growth continues to be distributed throughout the county in a very much more context sensitive manner. This gives you the numbers of how much we're expected to grow in the next 30 years per se. And you can see very quickly that it's just over 500,000 people. If we don't do anything about the way that we're growing, we're going to continue to be reactive to development that is not expected or different than what we would be expecting. And Vision 2050 begins to address that in the best possible form. So if we were to present to you a vision statement, it is to recognize the diversity of the county. The county is not homogeneous. It has different level of character throughout the county, different lifestyles, and Vision 2050 begins to define its framework in that manner, in a way that we believe it's going to be much more resilient, sustainable, equitable, and includes the preservation of natural resources and built-out communities that are important to us. And one of them is Lake Avalon rural settlement. So we want to really focus in that specific area tonight. So we have the vision plan as Commissioner Wilson presented it. It's the bigger, much more engaging definition of goals, objectives, and policies of growth within the county. And what we're doing is we're taking a document that was adopted originally by the Board of County Commissioners more than 30 years ago and updating it, reorganizing it, making it much sensitive, context sensitive. And the code, which implements the vision. It's really the engine, as Commissioner Wilson presented it. It really, without that formula of both a vision document that is predictable and a code that implements what is in that document, it's the formula for success here. And our code, the Land Development Code, is over 66 years old. And we have incrementally over time been amending it with patches here and there. But this is an overhaul. It's defining the code in a very different way, not by separation of uses and regulating how uses are developed, but by integrating some of the uses in areas that make sense. And that is the combination of the formula into a much more place-based formula that allows for the county to celebrate what we consider to be important and be blunt about the areas that we collectively understand that are ripe for redevelopment, that are going to evolve, grow, and transform the character that they have right now. But let me just tell you something, that is not rural settlements. That is not happening within the rural settlements in the county, the 21 of them that are adopted already within the county. This is how, just a graphic representation of how we began to introduce that diversity in the county and really have a much more direct visual connection of areas that are natural outside the urban service area or even inside the urban service area that are going to be important to maintain areas that are rural in character as well as suburban. We have built out communities, built out neighborhoods in suburban areas that are going to be preserved because they're built out and they should not be absorbing quite a bit of growth. And then we go into the areas that are going to be very, very much impacted in terms of growth. And we're not shy about sharing this with anyone. We will continue to hear your comments about what we need to do in order to understand that the growth that you saw a few minutes ago, the 500,000 plus people, 700,000, almost 700,000 people in the next 30 years, find a place to live, work, play in Orange County away from rural settlements and away from areas that are built out. And that's exactly what this Vision 2050 is intending to do. And the code, again, with the parameters, with the actual standards that implement each one of those transition zones that you see displayed here, is what it's doing. But we're focusing tonight's comment on this general area, rural. How do we preserve that? How do we keep what's already been drafted in policy in the comprehensive plan? And how do we make sure that Vision 2050 does not affect the character of that lifestyle? So this is the plan today. That's the comprehensive plan, the one that got adopted in 1991. It has a series of different chapters or elements, whatever you want to call it, or however you want to describe it. And we learned over the years, over the last 32 years, that those elements are in isolation sometimes. And we stopped and talked among each other about a better way to put it together, a way that made a little bit more sense, a way that turns this regulatory document into a vision plan. And that's what we did. Basically, it takes all of those required elements and combine them into chapters that talks about, chapter 1, for example, the land use as well as mobility and neighborhoods. Does that make any sense about how to begin to better understand the creation of those places that are not in isolation from each other? And that's what, we ended up with 10 different chapters within the vision plan. And then we have a framework, a very, what we consider to be, with everyone's input over the last 6 years, the creation of a framework that allows us to define a solid vision that is not perfect. And at this particular stage, it needs to continue to hear from you to make it even better than what we would have been ready to present to the Board of County Commissioners back in last month, at the 11th of last month. So 3 different planning dimensions, if you would. The market areas just begin to geographically define the fact that in Orange County we have 6 different market areas, from the core area within the city of Orlando, to the south, to the southwest, to the northwest, to the east, and the rural east. Those are the 6 market areas, as simple as that sounds. We have sectors. We have 6 different sectors as well. And I'll go into the details of what they do. And then the place types is just another way to define future land uses, with the only difference that we're not talking about commercial, industrial, residential in isolation anymore, but in places that make sense and that are suitable for the combination, integration of those uses, whether it's vertically integrated or horizontally integrated. That's where the targeted sector comes in, and none of that is happening within the Lake Avalon rural settlement. So this is just a graphical representation of those market areas, better defined here. And I just wanted to highlight at the top of the slide here, all 21 rural settlements in Orange County. And the reason why we're here tonight, highlighted right here, that's where we are. Great ride over here, by the way, and really engaging environment throughout the roads and corridors that I was able to experience in a different perspective tonight. So that's where we're at. That's how this measures against the county, against all 21 rural settlements in Orange County. Let me zoom in so that we can find out a little bit more about what this rural settlement is all about. Just over 2,200 acres and about 350, 360 parcels altogether. That's what that white line is really all about. This represents the actual sectors of the county. And what are the sectors? This is just, we take out that central portion that you see in the middle of the county is the urban service area. We decided to remove that so that we can focus on the rural service area, everything outside where we should be growing, everything outside where we have the services to be able to accept the absorption of that population growth, which again, is over 500,000 people in the next 2070. That's not going to happen all at once. It's going to happen incrementally every year at 2% for the next 27 years, all the way to the year 2050. The vision plan begins to introduce strategies, and these strategies are just what I just mentioned at the beginning of the presentation here. We have to collectively accept that in order for us to grow sustainably, in a very sustainable manner, in a responsible way, in a healthy way, we need to identify those areas that are going to transform the character of what they are today, that they're going to evolve being something else that they're not today, and that they're going to grow more in densities and intensities, meaning number of units, of residential units, and what complements that is the actual non-residential square footages, the floor area ratio of those areas to create places in ways that we don't experience today. In other words, that area that just was shown as the void in the county, the urban service area void, that's where all of this is happening. With the exception of what's coming next, which is the areas that we're going to be maintaining. And the areas that the plan today, the vision plan, intends to keep the character of what they are today and the lifestyles that they enjoy today, residents just like yourselves and your future generations, it's intended, embedded, and has the foundation in the plan to continue to maintain the character of what they are today. So when we put all of this growth in perspective, how are we looking at growing in this very responsible way that we just talked about? Generally, 13 municipalities, whichever way you want to look at those, in Orange County, they receive a growth rate of approximately 37% of the growth in the county. So when we project the 27 years, that 37% of growth out of the 700,000 people is 255,000 people. That goes into every one of the cities within the county. Anyone that you may want to think about, it's distributed between all of the cities. The next 4 sectors that just highlighted here are part of the framework of Vision 2050. We have a sector that is defined to be established sector. Those are the suburban areas, the neighborhoods that are already established. Most of them are built out. They're gonna continue to grow because there's still undeveloped land within those. They're gonna continue to find opportunities to grow in a healthier manner, to densify a bit. And that's why you see a level of absorption out of the 700,000 people, about 44,000 is going towards the established sector. The intended sector are all of those master plan communities in the county. Those that have already gone through an approval process, those that are already, that were adopted with their own policies, those that were already adopted even with their own standards and their own code. And those are going to be left alone. We're going to continue to implement with some level of modification in terms of what happens around them, but not within them. And that will continue to have a level of absorption of about 65,000 people. The targeted sector, though, again, this big area where we're not shy to share with everyone that this represents about 37,000 acres within that area that was the whole within the county, in the urban service area. The majority of it happens to be there. 37,000 acres in which the majority of those particular parcels are commercial, some of them may be industrial, some of them may be non-residential altogether. And there would be areas of opportunities that are suitable for transforming, evolving, and growing those particular areas into much more complete communities, so that the 44% of the growth in the county, that 304,000 people that you see here, is absorbed in that particular. We're incentivizing it, we're creating the opportunity for the market to be able to continue to develop those trends, so that they go away from those areas that we are intending to maintain, including Lake Avalon Rural Settlement. So that's how that adds up. 690,000 people. The framework defines those assumptions. So going back to the zoomed in areas, we have the sectors that define the entire boundary of Lake Avalon Rural Settlement, as highlighted here, as rural. It will continue to be rural. The sector defines it to be rural. Vision 2050 is not changing it from being rural. We looked at the place types, the new definition of future land uses. And just to define what they are, in terms of the specific place type categories, we have place types that are defined as centers. We have place types that are defined as corridors. And finally, place types that are defined as neighborhoods. And what Vision 2050 does, it begins to correlate away, it moves us away from the one-size-fits-all approach towards growth, and it begins to make sure that growth happens according to the character of the diversity, consistent with the diversity of the county in terms of lifestyles. And so what we have is a series of different place typologies is what we call it. We can call it whatever you want tonight, but in Vision 2050, they are place typologies that represent the actual way the development will happen in terms of growth within those particular areas. So highlighted in yellow here, you can see that there are some place types that are correlated to applicability in the rural service area, within the rural sector. Not all of it, though, is happening in Lake Avalon rural zone. So let's see what is happening in Lake Avalon. You still have the diverse amount of density that you have today. I'm just going to summarize it by saying that Lake Avalon rural settlement is probably the most rural settlement out of all 21 rural settlements in the county. You don't see anything highlighted here in red which would identify the specific location of one of those rural centers, because there isn't, in today's future land use, in the adopted comprehensive plan, and you look at the map, there is no one particular parcel within the boundary highlighted here that identifies any of these parcels as commercial, rural commercial, which would have been the way that we would have created the map. So you can see the diversity of the densities, or the way that each one of these parcels would be and will continue to develop over the years, unless the Board of County Commissioners, unless we receive, Orange County Planning and entire staff receives an application that is processed in a certain way with certain recommendations, measuring it to policies that are existing today and adopted by the board, and then we bring it to the local planning agency to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners anything. And anyone is able to ask for anything to be changed. It's really up to the foundation of that recommendation from both staff as well as the local planning agency, and the final word is always the Board of County Commissioners to make any changes to what's planned. So that's what we see here. Rural settlement 1 to 5, rural settlement 1 to 1, rural settlement 1 to 2. No surprises. Nothing has changed. This is, when you look at the vision plan, when you look at chapter 1, whether the sectors are in the rural service area or in that area that was the void in the center of the county, which is the urban service area, and the correlation or the coordination of where those sectors are. So the next column right here on the vertical orientation, you'll see the sectors, and then you will see whether they are neighborhoods, centers, or corridors. And right next to them, you will see what is applicable in terms of the specific densities, intensities of the place types that correlate to that. So that's what you'll learn quite a bit more, one-on-one, hopefully, towards the end of tonight's engagement here, as to how this correlation table, as we call it, works, and how predictable it is in terms of applications that will eventually end up being consistent with an adopted vision plan by the Board of County Commissioners when we recommend for adoption and the board ultimately adopts this. Whenever the time is right, that is when the Vision 2050 will become the guiding document for growth in the county. I just wanted to zoom into this particular one, because in this particular page where you see on the left-hand side the rural sector, you will see immediately to the right rural settlement 1 to 5, rural settlement 1 to 2, and rural settlement 1 to 1. Those are the place types. No surprises, nothing is changing. Immediately right next to it, you will see the densities. What can you develop within those? Nothing has changed. Everything is pretty much consistent. What you don't see is anything outside this, only for the purpose of today's conversation, because if you look at the maps as drafted in terms of the sectors and the place types in Vision 2050, you will not see any other place type within the boundaries of Lake Avalon Rural Settlement. Orange Code. What is Orange Code? Orange Code helps us begin to create a bridge between that general reference of chapters in the vision plan and how they land in the regulatory document or the code itself that implements those place types. Those place types, they're great in terms of how they're defined in Chapter 1 in Vision 2050 because it gives you a quick reference of an image, of a series of images actually, and a description of the intent of how those rules, those specific place types are intended to be developed. But here you begin to see the connection between not only how it's intended, but how it's regulated. So you have a higher level of predictability as to how those place types now will be implemented per code in the county. And there is no negotiated process where we're going to find a development that may be not expected in our backyard that all of a sudden popped out. Because for the most important aspect of the intent of Vision 2050 is to introduce a level of flexibility, yes, but more importantly, predictability as to how the county will continue to grow in the next 30 years. So we start with the comprehensive plan, the market area, the big macro approach towards the framework itself and the sector. So that's the base. Anyone who wants to know what's happening within their neighborhood or any applicant that comes to us, this is the place to start. Then it goes into the zoning aspects of it and the relationship, that bridge between the comprehensive plan and the zoning. You know, what is the place type that correlates in that table that was boring that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation? And it begins to kind of dictate once we go into the articles, and there are 5 articles in Orange Code that will give you the site, the building standards and site standards and everything else to implement that. A quick snapshot of what Orange Code is and how it's unified by all 5 of the different articles I just mentioned, with the last one being the definitions. And again, 2 documents are not perfect today. They're not going to be perfect ever. They're going to continue, they're organic. They're going to continue to reorganize themselves into incremental changes. But it's certainly, we believe, and hopefully everyone who has been sharing their thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns over the last 6 years with everyone who has had the opportunity to do that, thinks that what we're going to end up 3 months from today is going to be a lot better than what was ready to go in front of the Board of County Commissioners a month ago or several weeks ago. Again, the code is not inconsistent with the transition elements that I just showed you in the comprehensive plan. The same transect reference of going from natural preservation areas all the way to a very urban type of environment is still consistent in the code. And there is that level of correlation. Again, for tonight's discussion, we're focusing on the rule. And you have hopefully a clearer understanding of what Vision 2050 is doing to your rural settlement. You're gonna experience some of the stations today that become very interactive. This is a web page that is active today. You can go ahead and go into the web page and navigate through the sectors. You can zoom in. It's GIS based, which means that it's not a static plan. It really, you're able to find your specific parcel where you live and zoom in and tap on it, where you will be able to have an opportunity to tell us whether you agree, you disagree, or you want any comments to be left for this ongoing engagement. So we're going to now we're going to break out into the opportunity to talk to all the folks over here. We're going to come back later and tell you what we have heard.
Don't hesitate to give feedback, even if it's not in the same vernacular that they use. I am not a trained engineer or planner, and sometimes I'm like, talk to me like a dumb lawyer. Just talk to me because I sometimes need a translation. But what that means is that we just have to be able to explain it and talk about it and take that feedback in real terms. Then the planners can do what they need to make that official. But I think it's important that we're all speaking the same language. So anyway, make your way around, and then we'll try to make sure we're getting back here to cap it off.
So as a lot of you folks that were in our table, like the conversation that we were having went way beyond the map, right? So what people were saying was that there's a general frustration with how things are planned and how things actually develop, and how little control they feel they have over time as the communities go from planning to actually being places or not being places. There was a lot of comments, a couple of people that actually work in planning saying that we're not developing Horizon West inclusively as destinations, as places that have all this stuff that we were trying to get. And a lot of frustration too of people who came from other places to then find out that all the stuff that they didn't like from the other places that were crowded or that were already beyond repair are now starting to develop in the places that they are now. So all I could say is we're trying to change that pattern, because what the reality is that today we're tied up in a lot of our processes, a lot of our planning today is tied up by processes that we have and the legislation that is already outdated and insufficient. So that through Vision 2050 and more importantly through the implementation of the code, that then we can actually try to enforce the creation of places and planning for our people as opposed to planning for everything else.
Can I see if you can raise your hand if you think the tool that was shared with you, those that were able to experience it, is it helpful? Is it helpful to better understand what Vision 2050 is doing? Are you going to be able to give comments to all? Raise your hand if you think that's the case. Okay, great. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you. I'm going to ask David Ward to come to stand here and tell us what you're doing.
Sure.
What did you say?
I was at the comment station, sort of a general comment station. And I heard from a few folks, the two messages that really resonated with me, and the gentleman was fairly passionate about things. He's a little concerned about the public resources being expended for all this planning. And he really wanted to, we've done, I think, such a good job, and we've brought a lot of staffers here, and a lot of exhibits and whatnot, and he's kind of curious about, how much public monies are being spent for all of this planning, particularly since a lot of the development that we may see won't happen in the rural settlement area. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all.
I just don't want our taxes to go up because of what you guys as a county are planning to do somewhere else. I mean, I don't want you to do anything here, but I don't want to pay for what you guys are doing somewhere else.
Understood.
They're already too high.
Got it. So that was one of the comments. And another gentleman was particularly interested in preserving the natural resources in the Lake Avalon rural settlement area. And he mentioned that he moved here long ago, and he identified the terrific. He called the area, he described it, he said, folks, it's a diamond. Lake Avalon rural settlement is a diamond within Orange County. And he talked about the trees and the birds and that. And folks moved here because of that setting, and that's important to them. So those were two comments that I got at our station.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. I'm just going to add a little bit to that. Which one, a group of folks I was speaking to wanted a little bit more predictability in terms of how to protect the rural settlements in general. Specific discussion was about the Avalon and about how when we receive an application that is inconsistent with the character of the rural settlement, we should have policies in Vision 2050 that gives staff as well as the local planning agency strength to be able to make a recommendation going back to the Board of County Commissioners and make the final decision to identify something that is inconsistent in which we will be protecting the rural settlement. So I'm going to ask Eliza, Juliana to come to the center of the circle here. Also understand a little bit more about zoning comments that they received.
We had a number of questions about specific uses that either are allowed now that aren't very comfortable. Like we understand that landfill is one of the uses that's currently permitted in the agricultural zone. rural, animals, veterinary, animal services. There's some concerns around that, and kind of standards would go with that. Or RV, that was another one we heard that there were some concerns about being a neighbor within this context. We also had some discussions that I think linked to what Alberto talked about what does it mean when somebody has 1 for 2 or 1 for 1, and the difference between the density versus the lot size. And at a 5-acre density, the density and the lot size are pretty much the same thing. Whereas when you get into the 1 for 1 or 1 for 2, then you start to have to break up infrastructure for stormwater and roads, and the lot size and the density aren't necessarily exactly the same thing. And that there can be a disconnect in expectations there with what actually gets built. We also have some questions about some of the zones that aren't necessarily applicable to this area, but have the word rural in them. So rural T4, for instance, is a smaller lot zone that was really envisioned for the rural clusters and rural villages, which aren't applicable to the rural settlement, but has that word rural in it. So there's questions about how that would apply here. Generally, I think the answer is it wouldn't. But it is part of the countywide vision for what rural clustering might look like in certain areas.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then our last station here, I'm going to ask Allison. But before I do, I want to recognize other stations that we, the planning commission, is fortunate enough to have with us tonight, including EPD, University Grant. Any specific questions before we leave that are environmental concerns that we may want to discuss further with them? Please do so. We have Ryan with Transportation Planning Commission. Thank you very much. Any comments you may have also go. We also have Dana. Can you raise your hand, Dana, with Housing Division? Housing is a big concern as we continue to grow in the county. And Regina Ramos as well with Parks and Recreation Department. So thank you very much, all of you. Am I missing anyone? Thank you, all of you. Sustainability being a big component throughout the document that is out there. Thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, Chief Buffkin was also here. I don't know.
Oh, that's Chief. Great.
I know the fire rescue oftentimes has to go.
Yes.
But she was here and has really kept a close eye on this process, so they are also into the conversation.
Thank you.
Well, I saw a couple of questions, these kind of cards that were left, and some of them reflect things that I've heard throughout the night. The first one requested more policies that support dark sky lighting. So to protect the night skies, have lower lighting that won't escape into the atmosphere. The next one, there are a couple of requests for the rural center to not allow 2 dwelling units per 1 acre with the commercial use on the same property, but instead limit it to 1 dwelling unit per acre. There were also quite a few comments about the process for any developers who wanted to come in and whether the new Vision 2050 plan would make it more difficult for developers to change the density or the use of the properties within the rural settlement. I think a lot of people here are very weary of having to pay attention to anyone coming in and to constantly have to go to BCC meetings and fight change to their lifestyle. So there were a lot of process changes reflecting that.
Thank you, Allison. And two more things before I turn it over to the Commissioner Wilson tonight. One is that most of what you just heard in terms of the summary of the highlights will be found within the webpage, the 2050 webpage. So you'll be able to go back and take a look at those comments, all of the ones that we received tonight. And the last question for anyone in the room is if we missed any highlights that you would like to share. Anything that we completely missed that you shared with us that you didn't hear tonight out of any one of the stations. Great, thanks.
I just want to mention one that we heard that I thought was very important.
So we heard at our station that not in comparison to preservation lands, but conservation lands, and how they align with wildlife corridors, and how development may impact that, because sometimes conservation lands end up being changed and developed. So that was a very important concept that we wrote down, and specifically related to showing that on mapping, so that people can see those large conservation spaces that might be part of a corridor that we need to protect in a different way.
I think to add on to that was feedback I got about open spaces, and that even if there are designated conservation preservation, that each community needs its own open spaces, and that should be passive and inclusive of wildlife and natural components in order for it to be a fully functioning community. I hope I already put it up there. And that those sort of areas even are more organized and looking for opportunities for those open spaces. I think as a separate question that I have about the clustering in Alberto, and this came from actually speaking to somebody in a different local settlement, I know that in the past there have been uses for open space requirements that included things like retention or surface waters. And in order to really appreciate open space in the community, it has to be something that can be passive open space, or it can be a habitat, right, for terrestrial beings of some kind. And how do we make sure that those things are considered open space very specifically separate from water?
Yeah, so Commissioner, that is an extremely good question and concern as well. The difference between our code today versus Orange Code in the future is that it requires a qualifying open space at a percentage of the development beyond those utilitarian needs of retaining water, or there's no longer going to be counted as leftover residual open space. They would have to qualify a specific percentage of the development to be able to integrate, become a discernible center of that particular community in a passive mode, whether they're squares, greens, plazas, or any one of the lists that are part of the draft today in Orange Code. And they have to meet certain standards as well, so that we're just not all over the page. There's a higher level of predictability in that regard. So that's a great question.
So you know what that means, right? If all this conversation was complex, I'm going to come back to you and get to Orange Code. Because this is really valuable, and I'm so grateful for the level of participation and the level of, I think, compassion and empathy this entire community has, and especially about how we grow, about how we affect each other and the world around us. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I want to thank the Orange County team, and amazing amount of knowledge and work goes into not just this document, but also trying to figure out how to translate this document and trying to help me get your ideas back into this document so that our children and their children can appreciate the fruits of our labor. So I appreciate you, and please, if you have any questions after this, it doesn't have to be end. There's going to be continued meetings like this in other areas of the county, and if you give us an email, we will send you out a whole list. We'll go onto the website and make sure that we're connecting you also with the right staff. And I think that's it. Unless there's any other announcements, any other police tonight, or
Here.
any last minute?
Just as an FYI, I got some information that we will put together on an email and send out to membership, particularly about the landfill. Thank you, EPA guys over there. Appreciate that. And we'll get that.
Thank you to other members of the Green Cross Church. I think it's such a great partner in allowing us to utilize this space and how it's kind of spread out and be able to get this type of engagement. So thank you to them, and thank you, of course, to Lori and the guys on the HOA for the wonderful work they do. All right, have a good night.